welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 524 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm going to ask you to agree with me and ask you to hear me out. Last episode, I finished the AFC part of my preseason divisional breakdown. And by the end of it, I came to the conclusion that if we're ranking the AFC divisions, I have the AFC North, AFC West, AFC East, and AFC South. This episode, I'm starting the journey in the NFC. And I think I want to get it out the way. I know I don't like starting off bad, but I wanted to get the NFC South out of the way because that is by far not just the worst division in the NFC, but you can debate if it is the worst division in football. And I don't think that there's any debate who the worst team is in the NFL, and that is the New Orleans Saints. And the New Orleans Saints, they're not just bad because of they just don't have good players. They have good players. It's just bad because of contracts, roster construction, and essentially what they have. First and foremost, let me say, their three quarterbacks is Jake Hayner, Spencer Rattler, and Tyler Soot, or Saw. Not great. On top of that, this team is the poster child for bad contracts and what happens when a team ages. Honestly, I know they have Cam Akers. I know they have Alvin Kamara. They got Clyde Edwards-Helaire from the Kansas City Chiefs, but they don't have much. This is an aging roster. And on top of that, not only is it an aging roster, it's one of the most expensive rosters in football. That should never go together. This isn't – there's not going to be a last ride, you know. There's not going to be a LA Rams when they had Von Miller and Aaron Donald and Odell Beckham Jr. And this isn't one of those. This is an old, not really good roster and expensive. Two things you don't want to be. And I think the worst part is I don't know the direction. I don't think fans, it doesn't really seem like the organization. I don't know the direction that this organization is going in. And to be honest, they backed themselves up into such a corner, a bad corner at that. This is how it was going to be for a couple of years. Because I don't think they're going to be bad. Well, they could be bad enough to get draft picks, or to get a good draft pick. But who are they going to get? I don't foresee, unless they get Archie Manning. But it's like, is Archie Manning going to save this situation? I doubt it. It is a bad situation. On top of that, like, again, Chase Young, he's expensive. I like Chase Young, but I don't think he Demario Davis, but he's up there in age. He's 36 years old. Like, I'm looking at this roster. This is not a good roster. Not a good roster at all. And that is a terrible feeling when it's not a good roster that you're looking at, but you're also looking at one of the most expensive rosters. Again, you have Alvin Kamara, Foster Moreau. He's pretty good at the tight end position. Chris Olave, but he can't. He continues to get hurt. Obviously, you hope for a healthy season, but that's just what we've seen. And Rashid Shaheed, who is essentially their big game wide receiver. This is the worst situation in football. You know, it's bad when you have a situation like the Cleveland Browns. How they have a bunch of quarterbacks. They just don't know who they're going to. I know that it was announced that Joe Flacco is going to be the starter, but you don't really know who the backup quarterback is going to be, and there's not really a sense of direction of when that backup quarterback is going to start unless something happens with Joe Flacco. That's bad. But you can blanket it as, okay, well, we still have a pretty decent roster. And we still have a player that is elite in their position. Again, Myles Garrett is probably the best defensive player in football. So, while they got all that quarterback stuff going on, and you know that even at their best, they're not going to win a Super Bowl, you still have proverbial light at the end of the tunnel when we talk about the Cleveland Browns. I don't see a light at the end of this tunnel for the Saints. Like, what I try to do in these breakdowns is I try to give the positives. And I did. They have some pieces. Chris Olave is really good when healthy. Alvin Kamara, even though he's getting up there in age, Alvin Kamara is still a pretty good running back. They still have Foster Moreau good at they still have pieces. But those pieces aren't changing the fact that this is a bad team. And again, what's worse about that is a bad, expensive team, especially when you pay someone like Chase Young, who, again, I like Chase Young, but hasn't shown to be worth the price tag. And your three quarterbacks on roster is Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shaw, and Jay Herner. On top of that, you have Kellen Moore as your head coach. Last time we saw Kellen Moore, he was winning the Super Bowl as, I believe, the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was also a longtime coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. This is arguably one of the worst situations to walk into as a head coach. The team doesn't have a sense of direction. It's an older team. Oh, you got Brandon Cooks. There you go. It's an older team. It's an expensive team. And your calling card has been offense. But you're going to a team that does not have a good offense. Because you have three quarterbacks that probably can't even run the offense that you want to run. Tough situation. Again, I tried to be as positive as I can be in these breakdowns, but I also can't lie. This is the worst situation in football. When we talk about teams, this could arguably be the worst team in football. And I think the worst part about it is there's no momentum going into the season. The team was god-awful last year. Towards the end, they started off, and I talked about this a lot, they started off red hot. I think they were like 4-0. Then just plummeted. Derek Carr retires. Yeah, this is a bad situation. Mm, mm, mm. Again, I'm trying to find redeeming qualities. They have pieces sprinkled around, but it also goes to okay, Brendan Cooks, who is 31 and been in the league for 12 years. Cool. He's an okay receiver. He's a home run receiver as well as Rashid Shaheed. Chris Olave again. You hope that he's able to stay healthy, but he's had trouble doing that. Okay, all these people are great. Foster Moreau, he's a really good tight end, but are you going to be able to get them the ball with the quarterback that you have? On top of that, the offensive line is terrible. I talked about the Cincinnati Bengals having one of the worst offensive lines in football. The Saints are one of them as well. The Saints might be the worst, might be. And I don't know, man. I feel bad for Saints fans because, like, you know what it is? It's the same situation as the Steelers. It's just the Steelers have proven to be, over the years, a slightly better organization when it comes to making decisions. In the sense of neither one of these teams, the Saints or the Steelers, have prepared themselves for the departure of a Hall of Fame quarterback. The Steelers did not prepare themselves for the departure of Big Ben, and the Saints did not prepare themselves for the departure of Drew Brees. What the Steelers were able to do is they're able to still lean on a competent organization, a really good head coach in Mike Tomlin, and you still have you stuck to your core. While no, you did not prepare for the end of Big Ben, you stuck to the fact of the Steelers have always been, since their lineage, have always been a defense first team. Now, that since Big Ben has left, that hasn't really equaled playoff success. But what it has done is you've been able to wrap your arms around something positive. Since Drew Brees left, what has been the most positive thing for the Saints team? Having Cam Jordan still there? Again, another good piece, but if I'm not mistaken, let me check to see how old Cam Jordan is. Cam Jordan is 36 years old. Demario Davis, like I said, was... How old is Demario Davis? Give me a second. Wait a minute. I know I just said 36 years old. Those are your two defensive pillars. Marshawn Lattimore retired. Again, Derek Carr on the offensive side retired, and he even wasn't really moving the needle like that. So the Saints have done an absolute horrible job of preparing themselves and decisions moving forward, or decisions after Drew Brees was there. And we're seeing the reality of those decisions. The Saints are one of, if not the worst teams in football this year. Mark my word. I can be wrong, but there is absolutely no signs that this team will make a drastic comeback or a 180 from last year. Have you seen them in the preseason so far? I don't want to stay on this too much longer because, again, I don't want to. Good luck, Kellen Moore. That's what I will say. Good luck to Kellen Moore because you have an aging expensive roster. And you're a new head coach. So, yeah. The Saints will be, in my opinion, the worst team in football. At least one of the worst. Obviously, injuries can change a lot, but I think they'll be one of the worst teams in football. And honestly, if you look at damn near every decision they've made since Drew Brees left or retired, it's not hard to predict that. Again, they're about to trot out Spencer Rattler out there as a starting quarterback. Yeah. Which kind of brings me to, in fact, momentum is a thing. And I know that they say that every season is its own story, which in a lot of areas is true. A lot of areas, whatever happened last season, outside of, maybe an injury or something, whatever happened last season was last season, and you don't really bring it into next season. Momentum can be carried from season to season. You can end the season really well and ride that momentum in the off season and in the preseason and then in the regular season. Not saying that if you went on a 3-game winning streak, you're not going to lose a game. I'm not saying that, but things can look different. Things can feel different because of momentum. The Saints had one of the worst momentums. They had absolutely maybe negative momentum going into the season, and we're kind of seeing that it's remained the same, and I don't foresee much success from the Saints. The Panthers, on the other hand, and I'm looking kind of solely at Bryce Young, they actually had positive momentum ending last season. Well, no, they didn't make the playoffs anywhere close. Bryce Young was almost the butt of everyone's joke when you talk about the poster child of a failed draft pick. When you saw what C.J. Stroud was doing compared to what Bryce Young was doing their first year, it was night and day. People were saying that Bryce Young is one of the worst number 1 overall picks in NFL history. That's what was being said about Bryce Young. Towards the end of, he even lost his job. The man lost his job to Andy Dalton. And to put that into perspective, Andy Dalton, might I add, is 37 years old. So last year he was 36. But we talk about momentum. Bryce Young, towards the end of the season, maybe the last, I'll say 3 games, looked all of a number 1 overall pick is supposed to look like. It felt like the last 3 games or so, Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers had new life. It felt like, and it kind of, Bryce Young showed why he was a number 1 overall pick. Now, do I think that the Panthers are going to ride that momentum to the win the division and make it to the playoffs? Heavens no. I don't think they're that good. I was looking at this roster while I was doing this, and there's not much to wrap your arms around. I mean, you have J.C. Horn, you have Xavier Legette, you have Adam Thielen, but he's the vet, and he shouldn't really be depended on at this point of his career. You have Chuba Hubbard. Like, there's pieces. But this isn't a championship, let alone, I don't even think this is a playoff team. But if you want to admit it or not, and if obviously teams aren't going to come out and say this, because it's like if you're one of the teams that comes out that says this, as a fan, it's like, why am I going to support? Because a lot of fans still have that delusion that almost every team is if they're the fan of their if you're a fan of a team, you have a Super Bowl chance. That's what almost every fan feels like. Almost, I said. Every fan feels like going into it. So if you come out, because it is true that not every team's goal is to win a Super Bowl. Teams, by training camp, by preseason, like, you kind of know where your team is. You kind of know the ceiling for your team. And I think the Panthers organization has to know. If they're a smart organization, this team right now is not a Super Bowl caliber team, let alone a playoff team. So you have to ask yourself, what is the goal? What should be, what at the end of the year, what is looked at as a successful season for a team that probably understands that they're not even close to a championship, and honestly, I don't think they're going to win a division. Well, it's simple. It's about player development. And you hope that by the end of the year, that small leap, 2, 3, 4 game momentum that Bryce Young developed last year carries into this year, and you ride that momentum throughout the season. You want to look up towards the end of the year and feel, okay, Bryce Young is one of the better young quarterbacks in the league. Bryce Young has justified why we drafted him number 1. You want to hope that by the end of this year, they start legit separating Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. It's very hard to do because you see the success that C.J. Stroud had, minus the success or the lack of success that Bryce Young had. They're always going, not always, but they have been synonymous with each other for as long as they've gotten drafted. You hope that by the end of this year, Bryce Young, not saying that Bryce Young is going to be better than C.J. Stroud, but you hope that he plays well enough that C.J. Stroud and that comparison is an afterthought. Because I want to explain this. For people that don't, do I think that C.J. Stroud is better than Bryce Young? Yes. Do I think that he is leaps and bounds better than Bryce Young? No. What I think it is, and I talked about this during the draft, and I talked about this, I think, towards the end of their rookie year. There's a theme that always finds its way into this podcast. There is a saying that I feel is constantly said on this podcast, but that's only because it is true and it is very important. And that saying is, fit matters. Situations matter. Where you're drafted to, a team that you're traded to, what the environment around you matters. And C.J. Stroud went to a team that had a thriving head coach, had an incredible draft for him that had a lot of young new pieces and that had a brighter future, and at the time of his rookie year, not last year, but his rookie year, had a better offensive line. So you put in a good head coach, good pieces around him, good offensive line, and a good, at least at the time, in what it seems like, a good front office. compared to what Bryce Young had. One of the worst offensive lines in football. No weapons to outside of Adam Thielen, but if I'm not mistaken, Adam Thielen got hurt Bryce Young's first year. And even that, Adam Thielen's not, you trade DJ Moore. So you're taking pieces away from Bryce Young. And there was nothing but instability around that organization. And to this day, it's gotten a little better, but to this day, it's still instability in Carolina. I talked about this last episode when we talked about Joe Burrow. Now, no, I'm not saying Bryce Young is Joe Burrow. Not even close. But what I'm saying is, it's especially in the game of football, one player it's very rare, almost unheard of, that one player can blanket all of the dysfunction. So Bryce Young went into a situation that he was the brightest of light around nothing but darkness, which over time, and again, when you're talking, and I talked about it during the rookie year, there's some rookies, no matter where you drafted, that need more help than others. So, yes, I think in that instance, C.J. Stroud didn't need as much help as Bryce Young had, but he had more help than Bryce Young had. So fast forward to today. Again, you can ride momentum. And by the end of last year, Bryce Young looked really good. Yes, he still had his moments, but he looked really good. And you're hoping that Bryce Young rides that momentum and this team rides that momentum into this year. And when you look, you hope that they don't, especially with the Saints, you hope that you don't finish last in the division. That's a step up. And you're hoping that you're getting a clear vision of what you have. And you have a clear vision of you have your future quarterback. Because if I'm not mistaken, Bryce Young is only 24 years old. So you're hoping that by the end of this year, we're not questioning, or you hope that going into next season or the draft, I'll say, you don't have to draft a quarterback. And I'm not saying he should be on the hot seat. Just solely because of what he's had to work with. But I'm looking at Dave Canales, the head coach. If those 3 or 4 games last year for Bryce Young was more of an anomaly instead of the norm, then we have to start looking at Dave Canales. And this is what I mean. Because I am not one of those people that are just, that you should just fire head coaches left and right. I think that there are things that are worthy to be fireable and unworthy to be fireable. You can finish 2-15. But if your team plays hard every day, you may have suffered an injury, or you may just not have the pieces. I don't think that's necessarily the coach's fault. Maybe you just don't have the talent. Maybe one of your key players were injured. I get it. But if you go 2-15 and you just looks like your team is just leaps and bounds terrible, they don't even give effort, that's when you have to start looking at the coach. And in this instance, you have the number one overall pick. You had a number one overall pick in Bryce Young. We saw the latter end of the season how good he could be. If he reverts back to what he looked like maybe his rookie year or the beginning of last year, you have to start questioning when does player development kick in? When do you start looking at it like, okay, yeah, the quarterback that you thought was the future, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more towards the end of the episode with another situation, but the quarterback that you thought could possibly be the future is now regressing. Where's the development? I'm not saying he should be fired, but there definitely has to be a conversation there if there is regress. Because this division, at least not the entire division, but these last two teams, the Panthers and the Saints, there has to be a fight for some type of pride. Pride that you don't finish as the worst team in the division. For either one of those teams, that would be a positive at the end of the season. And the Panthers have a much better roster. Not much. Has a better roster. They have better pieces. And they have younger pieces. That's that. And they have no matter how you feel about Bryce Young, he's better than whatever the hell the Saints got. So your goal is to let's at least finish. Let's not finish. And that's not the goal for everyone. And I'm not saying that you should be necessarily reaching for that every year. But if you're not a Super Bowl caliber team, if you're not a playoff caliber team, that's what you're fighting for. You're fighting to latch on to something. And you're hoping that Bryce Young is that. So we'll see. Again, they have some good pieces. It's just, we'll see. Man, the Saints. Let's go over to a very interesting team. An interesting team because there's a lot. This team can go one of two ways. It can. Let me not say that. I'm talking about the Falcons. It's very difficult to explain the Falcons. And it's very difficult to predict the Falcons because, one, we don't know what a full season from Michael Penix is going to look like. Two, we don't know what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. Is he going to be traded mid-season? Is he going to stay? We don't know. But let's talk about some things that we do know. I'll say this. This offense, with Drake London, with Kyle Pitts, this offense with Bijan Robinson is good enough to win the division. Yes, you would hope that the offensive line is a little better, but again, you have some core pieces. I think I'm still, not all the way, but I still have faith in Kyle Pitts more than other people, and that's understandably so. Kyle Pitts, it's been tough sledding since his rookie year. It's just been now I know a lot of people look at Kyle Pitts through a fantasy football eyes. I'm looking at in a sense of you're a first round pick and you barely get targets. Like that's an issue. But Michael Penix did come out and say that, Kyle Pitts is going to be a huge fixture in the offense this year, so we'll see. But this offense, again, Bijan Robinson, who is a top 5 running back in the league, Drake London, who is Drake London, can be at least right now a top 10 wide receiver in the league. Kyle Pitts, and then even on the defensive side of the ball, you have Jesse Bates, you have AJ Terrell. There's pieces that they have. This offense, at least, let's just stick with the offense. This offense can be good enough to be the best offense in the division, and that's saying a lot when we haven't got to the Bucs yet, but that's saying a lot with the Bucs in this division. This defense has pieces. I'm not saying that it's not gangbusters, but this defense has pieces. So the ceiling, I guess you can say, for the Falcons is winning the division, making the playoffs, and maximizing just the sheer talent that you have. The other option is they don't maximize their talent. They don't meet their meet their potential. I think, barring any injury, Bijan Robinson, he's so good that no matter what happens, he's going to have a good season. But that doesn't necessarily mean that for the entire, roster. Knock on wood, I don't wish injury upon anyone, but this is the first time we will see Michael Penix as a full-time starter since Washington. Washington College. And he's had an extensive injury history in college. I don't want to go over it because hopefully he's past it, but Michael Penix might not, might not reach the potential that he should. We know Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins is probably the only person in NFL history, next to maybe Jameis Winston, that can have a 500-plus passing yard game, and the next game have 3 or 4 interceptions. That. I don't know if it was exactly 3 or 4, but that is pretty much the roller coaster of a season that Kirk Cousins had last year, which is one of the main reasons why he was essentially benched. But again, they're the whole goal of this Falcons team should be to make the playoffs. Like I said, there are some teams like the Saints, like the Panthers, that look at their roster and like, we're not good enough to really compete for a playoff spot. Then there's some teams that is good enough to compete for a playoff spot, just might not be good enough to compete for a Super Bowl, and I think the Falcons are one of them. I'm not going to say that this is a make-or-break season. I will say this, actually. I'm not going to say that this is a make-or-break season for Michael Penix. I'm not going to say that at all. But what I will say is you're 25, which in the grand scheme of things isn't young, but in football years, you're 25 going into your second season. There's a lot of expectation with Michael Penix. And there's a lot riding on Michael Penix because I think the last thing that this team wants to do is go back to Kirk Cousins. Which let me put a pin in that and talk about Kirk Cousins for a second. For one, for the life of me, I don't understand why Kirk Cousins is still on this roster. If Kirk Cousins has already come out, I mean, he all but said it on the whole quarterbacks documentary that's on Netflix. But if you're not really open to mentoring and you feel like you're still good enough to be the starting quarterback of a team, which I respect that ideology. Again, he threw for 500 yards in a game last season. So I understand you thinking to yourself, I should be a starting quarterback. Even though he was amongst the league leaders in interceptions. If he's not open to really being a mentor for Michael Penix, on top of that, as much money as you paid this man to be a franchise quarterback. So I also understand why it's like he's looking at it like, wow, what's going on? And the fans are looking at it, it's like, bro, why did you pay Kirk Cousins all that? That's what we talked about during the draft when Michael Penix was drafted last year. It's like, why did you pay Kirk Cousins, like I think it was a 4-year deal. Like you paid him all that money to make him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league at the time. One, a lot of people don't think he deserved that. I'm one of them, but hey, it is what it is. But then the same draft, you draft Michael Penix in the first round. It just, I don't know. I feel like in certain ways, this is a boom or bust year for the Falcons. In a sense of, there's obviously a lot riding on the development of Michael Penix. And this is an uber talented offense. Like, yes, the defense still has some question marks, but it has Jesse Bates, it has A.J. Terrell. But this is an uber talented team. Or let's just take offense. And I didn't even mention Darnell Mooney. Like, you hope that this offense can carry you to heights that you haven't seen in a while. But I think if you don't make the playoffs, or at least, if you don't make the playoffs, then I'm not even looking at Raheem Morris because he's a great coach. But I don't know. I don't know. This is a very important season for the Falcons. And I think this is the first time we're really going to look into the window of the future for this Falcons team. This is a young team. But even with that, there is still expectation of, you have all this talent, like let's at least make the playoffs. At least make a wild card game, you know? We'll have to see. There's no doubt, however. I don't know why. I feel like I'm trashing them. I really feel like that, but I'm just being honest. There's no doubt in my mind that they are better than the Saints and the Panthers. You know what's funny? If you look at the top two teams, you wouldn't say that this is the worst roster or worst division in football, but those last two really bring down the property value of this division. I'm just saying, especially the Saints. I think there was a debate between the AFC South and the NFC South as to who was the worst division. Obviously, the AFC South has the Jaguars, the Titans, the Texans, and Jaguars, Titans, Texans, and Colts. And then, obviously, the AFC South has Panthers, Saints, Falcons, and Bucks. And if you really look at the construction of both of these divisions, there's a lot of similarities. So you can, as much as I think is going to be tough sledding for a lot of those teams in the AFC South, I don't, the Saints, man, the NFC South is tough. Again, I'm going to say that this is the worst division of football. But I feel like I just went on a tangent. Let's get back to the Falcons. Yeah, there's expectation of growth, and I think growth is Michael Penix looks like a franchise quarterback, and if he does that, this offense is too explosive not to be a top-tier offense and not to be in the playoffs, let alone maybe if you just want to say wild card, cool, but this offense is too good, and we'll see. I know last year they had tough time stopping people on the defensive side of the ball, but we'll see. We'll see. And speak of we'll see, you have the last team in the NFC South, and in my opinion, the best roster in the NFC South by far, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a lot of things that this Buccaneers team has the best of in the NFC South. I think by far they have the best quarterback in Baker Mayfield. Excuse me. I think by far they have the best defense in this division. I mean, you have Jamel Dean, you have Levante David, Antonio Winfield. I don't think they have the best offense. If we just talk about roster for roster offense wise, I think the Falcons probably has the best offense. But again, Baker Mayfield is the best quarterback in the division. They also have Teddy Two Glove Bridgewater on the team. Bucky Irving's on this team. Rashad White's on this team for the offense. And obviously you have Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Yeah. Jalen McMillan from Washington. He's pretty good. And obviously you have, what's his name? Why am I blanking on his name? Chris Godwin. And he should be coming back, hopefully by the end of the year. So, and I forgot about Tristan Wirfs. Yeah. I kind of feel this, again, the reason why I brought in the AFC South is because I kind of feel the same way about the Texans than I do about the Buccaneers. When I did the AFC South breakdown, I said that to me, while it's a bunch of question marks, the best team in the AFC South is the Texans. And there would be major changes or something major has happened if the Texans do not win the division. When you look at their roster, when you look at C.J. Stroud, it's just tough not to see the Falcon or the Texans not winning the AFC South. It's kind of the same way for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I know I just said that when you talk about the Falcons, their ceiling is winning the NFC South. I still think when you look roster for roster, the Bucs have the best roster in the division. And they also have the best quarterback in the division. And you can argue that they have the best coach in the division in Todd Bowles. And Todd Bowles has always been a defensive guy, and there's no surprise that the Bucs are one of the best defenses, or especially last year, were one of the best defensive last year. So, it's. I mean, when you got Via Vey, it's Chris Boswell. Oh, I forgot about him. Hassan Reddick is on this team. Damn, the decision that's never mind. Yeah, I it'd be tough for me to see this team not win the division. I think outside of having the best quarterback, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by far have a better defense than an overall better defense than the Falcons. And I mean, this is one of the teams that beat some of the top teams. They beat the Lions. And I think by now we know what we're going to get from Baker Mayfield. Like, we know who Baker Mayfield is. So I don't think he's – you can argue, and you can say he was – especially last year, he was a top 10 quarterback. I wouldn't be mad at that. I just question if his ceiling – because he's still one of those players that can have an incredible game, but he's like a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo in a sense of Baker Mayfield is incredible, and Baker Mayfield can have those games where he is the best quarterback on the field. He also will give you one or two plays where it's like he's gonna give the he's going to give the defense an opportunity. And if you take that opportunity, which we saw a couple times last year, a lot of times last year, then it's So, again, and I know it doesn't sound like it, but it doesn't sound like it, but I'm actually heaping praise on the Bucs. This team is the best team by far in the division. And if they don't win the division, a couple of things have happened. The Falcons have just ascended to heights that they can reach. It's just they especially offensively, the Falcons are just on another level. There was either a key injury or Baker Mayfield slipped back into that more times than not. Last year, the thing that helped Baker Mayfield is a lot of the reckless plays that he's used to, he dialed back. And I think it's no coincidence that once he dialed back, he saw one of the best seasons he's had as a NFL quarterback. there's a lot of people that were putting in, including myself. I think Baker Mayfield was a top 10 quarterback last year, and I think that you can put him in your top 10 quarterback rankings now. Once he kind of allowed the game to slow down for him, didn't rush things, didn't force things, that's when you saw the best Baker Mayfield. Well, if he slips back into that, that can derail this entire team. And we've seen it with Baker Mayfield, whether he was in Cleveland, whether he was in L.A., whether he was in Carolina. All maybe not great situations, but we did see Baker Mayfield try to do too much, which was also an issue. If Baker Mayfield slips back into that mindset, if injuries happen and the Falcons just take off offensively, that's the only way I can see the Buccaneers not winning this division. And honestly, I will go as far as to say I don't think this team is a Super Bowl caliber team, but it is a deep playoff team. That's how good I think this roster is. That's how good I think Baker Mayfield can be. And that's how confident I am that, the Buccaneers are a legit team. So you're probably asking yourself, Jay, you said that the NFC North is by far the worst division in football. Yet in the same breath, I said that the Buccaneers can be the Buccaneers are good enough in my opinion. They could be an NFC championship team, or at least a divisional round team. If you say that, and then you also said that the Falcons can be good enough to make the playoffs, how is this the worst division in football? And that's simple. The Saints are that bad. And while the Carolina Panthers aren't that bad, to me, it's a again, like I said, it's a race for worst when we talk about the AFC South and the NFC South. Every single team in the AFC South, in my opinion, are better than the Saints and the Panthers. I think the Panthers are better than the Saints, but I would pick the Colts over the Panthers. I would pick the Titans over the Panthers. I would pick the Jaguars over the Panthers. And I'm definitely picking the Texans over the Panthers. So if we're ranking the NFC South, I have the Buccaneers, the Falcons, a wide gap. Then you got the Panthers. Then you have a seismic gap. And then you have the Saints. So we will we'll see what happens, and that is the NFC South. Now, before I get off of NFL a little bit, I have to talk about, I think, the breaking news that dropped yesterday. So it's not breaking now, but it was breaking then. And that is, it's been confirmed that Daniel Jones essentially won the starting spot for the Indianapolis Colts, taking it from Anthony Richardson. Now, we also heard that, like I said earlier in the episode, Joe Flacco won the starting spot for the Cleveland Browns, but that was kind of anticipated, The real question was who is going to be the backup quarterback, which I think we're still waiting on. But this is such a career blow for Anthony Richardson. Now, let me talk about Anthony Richardson before I expand a little bit. I talked about the fact of, and I questioned when I talked about the AFC South, I questioned when a project was going to be deemed a success or a failure. And that statement was pointed at Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson has been a project his entire career, whether you date back to high school, whether you date back to college, whether you date back to the NFL. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Anthony Richardson doesn't have the talent of a high first round pick, which he was. Anthony Richardson has some abilities that make him very appetizing to a drafter, make very appetizing to an NFL team. I understand if you're the Colts why you would draft him as high as they drafted him, because he has talent that some other quarterbacks at elite levels don't have. There are things that he does better than a Patrick Mahomes, that he does better than a Joe Burrow, that he does better than a Lamar Jackson, that he does better than a Josh Allen. Some things, not all. But it would be blasphemous and a downright lie if you put Anthony Richardson in the same category, even in the same sentence as those quarterbacks, because he has other things, a lot more things that bring down his value, that make him more of a project than anything else. And I said, the worst thing that can happen is if Daniel Jones comes in and takes your spot. Because if that happens, I'm not saying, because he's still talented, I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson's career is over. I'm not saying that. He's still one of the younger quarterbacks in the league. I'm not saying that. But what I did say was, if he loses this starting battle to Daniel Jones, barring an injury, I think we are done seeing Anthony Richardson as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Because, again, we're not talking about Kirk Cousins here. If Michael Penix is just bad and he loses his job to Kirk Cousins, I understand. Kirk Cousins, as much as he's a roller coaster, his highs are still mighty high. We're not talking about, a quarterback that has a longevity of greatness that's just at the end of his career. No, we're talking about a person that had one good year, essentially, in Daniel Jones. One. And has been the definition of mid to bad since then. And he came to the team that drafted you and took your starting spot. Mind you, Anthony Richardson is healthy. I know he has a broken pinky, but that's not why he lost his spot. Or dislocated pinky. That's not why he lost his spot. He lost his spot because Daniel Jones was better than him in camp, which is such an indictment on if I'm not mistaken, Anthony Richardson was drafted third, if I'm not pick. Fourth. Anthony Richardson was drafted fourth overall. And you lost your starting spot to Daniel Jones. Now, Daniel Jones can just be god-awful. And that's why I said that things can happen. Daniel Jones can just be god-awful and they just go back to Anthony Richardson. Okay. Daniel Jones can get hurt. And they forced to go back to Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson can get traded to a team and that starting quarterback. There's a lot of things that can happen that can get Anthony Richardson back to the starting lineup to as a starting quarterback. So when I said that I think that we've seen the last of Anthony Richardson as a starting quarterback, what I meant was I think gone are the days where it's just an automatic, oh, it's his job to lose. No. At this point of his career, it's his job to win. If he don't win the starting quarterback position, like I don't think there's never it's his to lose. Nah. We've lost that. He lost that when he lost his starting spot to Daniel Jones. Stephen A. Smith said his NFL career took a major hit, and I agree. And I know people said it under my video when I talked about talked about Anthony Richardson, and I've seen it in the ether. They talk about his age because Anthony Richardson is still one of the youngest quarterbacks in the league, surprisingly. He's 23 years old. To put that into perspective, that is younger than Bryce Young. That's younger than Michael Penix. And that's also 3 days. He's 3 days older. He's 3 days older than Cam Ward. So yes, there's still youth there, which is another reason why I don't think his career is over. But you were drafted in 2023? You were drafted in 2023, which means you've essentially been in this system because you've had Shane Steichen as your coach. You've been in this system for essentially 3 years now. And there are still things that he's doing that people would call rookie mistakes. So the fact that you're still considered a project and you're still making rookie mistakes, like missing reads that essentially got you hurt in a preseason game, and again, you can even go back to college or high school. Anthony Richardson has never completed over 50% of his passes. If you want to round up, because I do round up, you can say 51. So just once. It's tough because, again, Anthony Richardson up to this point was viewed, even though all the flaws that he had, all the, stuff that he had, he was still viewed as a starting quarterback. That is now not the case. And ask anyone. Ask someone like Jameis Winston. Ask someone like Teddy Bridgewater. Ask someone like Tyrod Taylor. Once you lose your starting spot, I'm not saying it is impossible, but it's damn near impossible to get it back without something catastrophic happening. And if you do get it back, it's still very hard to keep. So we'll see what happens with Anthony Richardson. But I do know that at the start of the season, he will be the backup quarterback at 23. The backup quarterback for the Colts. Again, incredibly talented, and that's why I don't think his career is essentially over. He has talent, God-given talent, but it's just the other stuff that clearly isn't lining up with the talent. So, well, I wish the best for him, but we'll see. Oh, and last thing I want to say on that, because people, I do remember people in my comments was talking about he didn't get a chance due to injury. Like, he missed a lot of time due to injury, which I agree with. But I don't think people remember how he got hurt. He got hurt trying to do too much. It's okay to just slide. It's okay to give yourself up. No, every single time he got hurt, it's because he tried to do too much. I'm not saying that he essentially got himself hurt, but he didn't put himself in the best position not to get hurt. I'll tell you that. Which also goes back to decision making. Anthony Richardson's decision making put him in positions where he got hurt. Again, thinking he was Superman. He's not. These defensive players are bigger, stronger, faster than you. And faster than anything you've seen at Florida. And bigger than anything you've seen and better than anything you've seen at Florida. So you think you about to go head-to-head with a cornerback, with a lineman? It's not going to happen. Or I'll say, unless you... No, it's not going to happen. Which just... I get it. He's not going to be able to get reps if he's hurt, but you can do things to prevent yourself from getting hurt. And when he was in the game, he wasn't completing 50% of his passes. That's all I'm saying. Let's move forward. I am 31 years old. I've probably been... sports has always been on my entire life, but I've probably been watching sports heavy since I was about 5 or 6 years old. Meaning, probably since 1999/2000, I was watching sports heavy. Football, in general, is one of those sports. College football is also one of those sports. And in my 31 years of life, I have never seen a player in college better than Cameron Newton at Auburn. I've never seen a player and again, I'm telling you, when I came into watching college football, I've never seen a player better than, and I've never seen a season better than what Cam Newton did at Auburn in 2011. Winning the Heisman, winning the national championship over my Oregon, might I add. And, in my opinion, solidifying himself as one of the greatest college football players to ever walk the earth. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because Auburn, which I'm surprised that it took this long, but Auburn is going to retire or is retiring Cam Newton's number 2 jersey, or his number 2, at the start of this season. And this is me saying congratulations. And it's very understandable. Again, I'm shocked that it took this long. There is a small, mind you, we've seen seasons from Tebow that was incredible. We've seen seasons from Vince Young that was incredible. Baker Mayfield has some incredible seasons. Johnny Manziel has some incredible seasons at Texas A&M. We saw Kyler Murray. We saw RG3 at Baylor have some incredible seasons. All of which, not all, but most of which was rewarded by a Heisman. In my opinion, none of them come close to what Cam Newton did at Auburn. Let me remind you of something. I don't think there was one player on that Auburn team, at least on that Auburn offense. I don't know about defensively, but on that Auburn offense, there was not one player on that team that caught an NFL touchdown, that saw an NFL touchdown. In fact, I don't even think there was a player on that offense that was drafted. Cam Newton took a team that wasn't projected to be that good. They weren't that good, honestly. In the SEC, he took that team that I could be wrong. I'm sure if I am wrong, somebody will say in the comments. I don't think there was a player on that team that got drafted to the NFL. He took that team and won a national championship. In the SEC, where Alabama was at the height of its powers. Where LSU was at the height of its powers. Cam Newton reigned supreme. So congratulations to Cam Newton for getting your jersey retired. And that's one reason why I will stand on whatever desk I need to and shout to the mountaintops that Cam Newton should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's only been 2 players in the NFL, in NFL history, that has won a Heisman and an NFL MVP. Cam Newton's one of them. Lamar Jackson's the other. Cam Newton is one of the pillars and one of the main people that revolutionized the game at the quarterback position. And it's the Football Hall of Fame, not just the NFL Hall of Fame, because there are people that did absolutely nothing in the NFL but had illustrious college careers that are in the Hall of Fame. Cam Newton's not one of those people. Cam Newton had one of the best seasons we have ever seen from a college football player. And he also had one of the best seasons we've ever seen from an NFL football player in 2015. And mind you, I'm not even going to throw them under the bus. I'm just shocked that the Carolina Panthers haven't retired one yet, which should happen. But I digress. Cam Newton, congratulations to you for getting your jersey retired in Auburn. Well deserved. And in my 31 years of life, I have never seen a better season from a player in college football than what I saw Cam Newton do in 2011 in college football. Congratulations for getting your number retired. Cam Newton, in my opinion, had a lasting impact in sports. I don't think that you can talk about you can't talk about college football without talking about Cam Newton. I'm transitioning, and this is the last segment of the day. I am from the Maryland, D.C. area. I say this as much as I can because I'm proud of it. And it is an understatement to describe the importance John Wall had for the D.C. area. John Wall was so impactful for the D.C. area that a lot of people were rooting for John Wall more than they were rooting for the Wizards. Being the second, I believe, number one overall pick for the Wizards. And just the amount of success that he saw, that he was a part of with the Wizards, is why he will forever go down as one of the greatest Wizard and one of the most important players in DC sports history. I just talked about Cam Newton, and he had an impact on football in general. While I'm not saying John Wall had an impact on basketball in general, that would not be true. But John Wall had an impact on, you know what? That is true. I think John Wall had a lasting impact on basketball, because you can go back. John Wall is one of the pioneers for hoop mixtapes in high school. When we talk about the pantheon of hoop mixtapes, a lot of times John Wall's name gets brought up as one of the greatest hoop mixtapes in high school basketball history. And then he was a cultural phenomenon when he went to Kentucky. And he brought a lot of that cachet to Washington. And he forever changed Washington sports in the way that you view it. No, he didn't win a championship. No, he was never, in my opinion, the best guard in the league. But John Wall had a lasting impression and a lasting legacy in Washington sports history. And this is all coming off after yesterday John Wall announced his retirement from basketball after 11 seasons. And obviously not as a Bullet, because obviously they won a championship as the Bullets, but I don't think there has been another Washington player, basketball-wise, there's been another Washington player that has had the impact that John Wall had. Mind you, we've had Gilbert Arenas, we've had Antoine Jameson, we've had Caron Butler, we had Michael Jordan, we had Rip Hamilton, we had Jerry Stackhouse, we had Bradley Beal. There has not been a player, in my estimation, as a Washington Wizard that has had the impact that John Wall had, that the number 2 had in D.C. It's unfortunate that injuries and just the business caught up to John Wall at the end, which is why the later part of his career was not nowhere near as remarkable as the beginning. But again, with John Wall's retirement, I want to say congratulations for a successful career. Congratulations for being able to retire on your own merit. And as much as people want to argue or whatever, John Wall has had a lasting impact when you look at hoop mixtapes, when you look at, college and kids getting paid for their, in college, NIL. A lot of that comes off the back of John Wall in Kentucky and just how big hoop mixtapes were. And if I'm wrong, let me know. I don't think there's another Washington basketball player that had a bigger impact on the city than John Wall did. Congratulations on your retirement. And there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate all of you guys. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe if they're not. It definitely means a lot. I'm trying to grow the podcast, and I can't do it without you guys. So please like, comment, share, and follow. Same goes with the DSPs, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your DSPs. Please follow, please subscribe. It means so much to me. No platform is bigger than the other. I'm trying to grow the Unpopular Podcast unilaterally, so please help me do that. Again, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow, leave a rating. Hey, I appreciate it all. For the socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, please follow. I post pretty much daily there. If you want to debate, that's probably the quickest way to get to me. If you keep it respectful, I don't mind going back and forth. It just means, A, you're listening to me, and B, you have an opinion. Both I care immensely about. So if you keep it respectful, I don't mind going back and forth. Just leave it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe or follow, and it means a lot. Until next time, much love.